And then a heart-rending, inhuman scream rang out through the entire building. In front of all the cameras, the pastor's wife vanished in a blinding flash. All that was left on the floor was her empty dress, like an abandoned skin. But what really happened in that temple? Welcome to our channel, L'arbre à Palabre. If you love stories of mystery, family secrets and life lessons, you're in the right place. If you haven't subscribed yet, take a second to do it now and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our gripping stories. And now, let's discover our story from the very beginning. No one really knew when the building had started rising from the ground. Just yesterday, it was nothing but an abandoned vacant lot, grassy and silent. But in less than 3 months, a corrugated metal fence went up, hinting at frantic construction work, and suddenly a gigantic white complex with dark-tinted windows rose into the sky. Inside, a neon sign glowed day and night, Center of Immortal Grace. Local residents walked past the site, stunned. "Did you see that? It popped up like a mushroom after the rain," whispered a neighborhood carpenter. "It's like the ground was never even dug for the foundations," replied the tailor next door, narrowing his eyes. Very quickly, curiosity gave way to genuine fascination. From the first weeks, crowds flocked in. The sermons of young Pastor Samuel, with his deep, hypnotic voice, seemed to pass right through flesh to touch souls directly. Reports of spectacular healings multiplied. Women thought to be infertile became mothers, and businesses on the verge of bankruptcy suddenly flourished. And with the miracles, gold began pouring in. Envelopes stuffed with cash, luxury car keys, bank transfers, and even land titles piled up at the altar at every service. But behind this brilliance, a shadow lingered. No one knew Pastor Samuel's past, no trace of his home village, no name of a theology school, no old photo. He had appeared just like his church, out of nowhere one Sunday morning. Standing on his stage, bathed in the glow of the spotlights, Samuel savored the blind adoration of the thousands of faithful chanting his name. And yet, every time his gaze drifted to his right hand, a pang of icy dread pierced his heart. There, on his ring finger, gleamed that black ring, marked with a triangle, the silent symbol of the price he would have to pay. One Sunday morning, as the sanctuary overflowed with a packed crowd, Pastor Samuel took the microphone after a long, calculated silence. "Beloved, heaven has blessed me. After years of solitude devoted to the ministry, God is giving me my crown today." That's when she stepped forward, Bénédicta, a woman of unreal beauty, with impossibly smooth skin and a fluid, almost weightless gait. No one had ever seen her before, not even among the most devoted regulars at the back of the hall. And yet, from that day on, she took her place in the seat of honor at the pastor's right hand. 2 months later, their union was celebrated in a wedding of royal opulence, a procession of black limousines, royal tents set up in the courtyard, drones sweeping the sky, and a symphony orchestra. Everything seemed perfect, heavenly, divine. Yet, in the shadow of the festivities, an old church elder murmured quietly to the man beside him, "When a plant grows this fast without rain, it means its roots are drinking poisoned water." The next morning, that elder did not come to the service. His seat stayed empty. The official word from leadership claimed he had left on an extended spiritual retreat on a holy mountain. But the weeks passed, then the months. Despite his family's quiet searching, the man never showed any sign of life again. He had simply been erased. Now called Mama Pastor, Bénédicta carried herself with a troubling arrogance. She would step onto the stage in gleaming satin robes, clinging to every curve of her body like a second skin. The women looked away, the men pretended to pray. But when Bénédicta spoke, her sweetly bitter voice subtly twisted the scriptures. God does not look at the vain appearance of clothing, but at the freedom of the heart, she would repeat, her heels clicking against the marble. Behind her perfect smile lived a deep scorn. She looked out over that gullible crowd, aware that all it took was a glance and a twisted incantation to bend them all to her will. It was in this atmosphere of blind fervor that Amandine first walked through the doors of the great temple. She was a simple young woman, pure of heart and without malice, newly settled in the neighborhood. Eager to serve sincerely, she quickly joined the ministry choir. From her very first notes, her pure, clear voice rose above the instruments, deeply touching souls and bringing a genuine peace this place had never known. But from up on the stage, a fixed, icy gaze was already watching her. Bénédicta had sensed that a genuine light had just entered the house. One Sunday, as the service was in full swing under blinding spotlights and light stage smoke, Amandine sang with her eyes closed, carried by the melancholic chords of the piano. The whole congregation was swept into a kind of trance. That's when Bénédicta slowly stepped toward the center of the altar, grabbed the microphone, and whispered a single word in a haunting voice. Hallelujah! Instantly, a disturbing wave swept through the hall. Men began screaming in a trance. Women fell into convulsions, bewitched by this presence. Amandine slowly opened her eyes again, and suddenly the veil of the invisible tore open violently before her. What she saw froze her blood. Standing at the center of the stage was no longer a woman. Bénédicta had transformed into a hideous creature with a deformed face, its scaly skin oozing darkness. Around her neck hung a heavy chain of human hearts, still beating, and her long fingers writhed like hungry snakes. A sudden, overwhelming wave of nausea hit Amandine. Lord, it's a beast, she realized with a shudder of horror. Around her, the blinded crowd kept cheering the monster. Gripped by panic, Amandine dropped her microphone, which crashed heavily to the floor, pushed past the stunned choir members, and ran breathlessly toward the exit. Rushing through the suffocating hallway, she burst out onto the forecourt and collapsed in tears in the street, breathless, realizing the terrible grip the whole community was trapped under. The dread is building to its peak. Before we uncover the pastor's horrifying pact, if this story has you hooked, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It helps us enormously grow Larbra a Palabra. For 2 long weeks, Amandine shut her door to the world. She ignored every call, every anxious message from the choir members. But one late afternoon, as the dim light of dusk barely crept into her modest living room, 3 ministry leaders showed up at her door. Leading them was the choir director, his face tight with forced calm. "Amandine, we came because we love you," he began, arms crossed.
You were our finest voice. How could you abandon God's service so abruptly, in the middle of a service, without any explanation?" Amandine lowered her eyes, her heart heavy. She took a deep breath, then, in a trembling but deeply serious voice, let out what she had been holding in. "I didn't leave on a whim. What I saw that day on the stage, that wasn't a woman of God. Bénédicta is a creature of darkness. She doesn't teach life. She seduces, she lulls people to sleep, and she devours souls." An icy silence froze the room, instantly broken by the leader's sharp irritation. "Be quiet! Stop before you commit the ultimate sacrilege!" he shouted, his eyes burning with blind anger. "You're letting the devil confuse your mind and sow division. Mama Bénédicta is a warrior of fire, an anointed servant of the Lord. It's the jealousy of impure hearts that has always criticized her, and now you're falling into the same trap." Amandine looked at them with deep sorrow. She saw in their eyes the impenetrable wall of fanaticism, that absolute denial protecting their illusion. "You are blinded by the prestige of this building," she murmured, tears welling in her eyes. "But I will never go back there. The presence of heaven left that building long ago. It's a foreign altar that's been raised there, and you are worshipping death without even knowing it." The visitors left furious, convinced she had lost her mind, leaving Amandine alone in the dim light, praying for their lost souls.
What the faithful did not know, what even the ministry's closest staff could never have suspected, is that all this glory had taken root years earlier in the cursed silence of a sacred forest. Back then, Samuel was nothing but a struggling preacher, wandering from church to church. Worn down by failure, tired of waiting on a God who seemed silent despite his fasting and prayers, he had eventually given in to impatience. One stormy night, led on by a mysterious offer, he ventured alone into the depths of a dark jungle. The air there was heavy, cold, suffocating. At the center of a clearing, a circle of stones glowed with a sickly light beneath torches planted in the ground. There stood a man wrapped in a long, blood-red coat. But he was not alone. Arranged in a half-circle, 5 motionless figures watched the scene. Samuel's breath caught. He easily recognized a high magistrate, often seen on the evening news, an influential lawmaker known for his great devotion, and a beloved music star adored by young people. All of them had already been through this. The man in the red coat stared at the trembling young man and opened a dark wooden chest. Inside lay a black ring engraved with a triangle. "Here is your rise, son of the dust," declared the officiant's raspy voice. "You will wear this ring on your right ring finger, but listen closely to the price of your throne. First, your bloodline is voided forever. No child will ever carry your name, and you will never know fatherhood. Second, once your temple is raised, we will send you a wife that does not belong to the world of the living. She will preach at your side, and you will never be able to refuse her." The man stepped closer, his gaze boring into Samuel's terrified eyes. "And finally, for this altar to stand, 7 days after you buy your land, you must bury beneath the foundation of the main altar a living newborn." Samuel staggered, gripped by a deadly wave of dizziness, but the illusion of glory had already overpowered him. He held out his hand and let the ring slide onto his finger. A dreadful burning sealed his soul. A few weeks later, with the land purchased, Samuel received the signal.
In the middle of a moonless night, he collected a sealed wooden crate with a midwife with lifeless eyes. Alone beneath the stars, cold sweat clinging to his skin, he dug the ground with his own hands. With every shovelful of earth closed over the box, with every muffled sob buried underground, he traded away a piece of his humanity for the fate of men. The very next day, the foundations were poured. Money, fame, and power immediately poured in like a raging river, sealing him forever in his golden prison.
5 years passed, and the Centre of Immortal Grace decided to celebrate its anniversary with unprecedented splendour. The great hall gleamed under majestic golden banners, television cameras captured the event, and an immense crowd rejoiced in overflowing jubilation. To mark the occasion, Pastor Samuel had invited several preachers, including Pastor Emmanuel, a humble and quiet man of faith from a remote province. Simply dressed, holding a worn Bible close to his chest, Emmanuel stepped up to the microphone under the indifferent gaze of the leadership. As soon as he began to speak, the atmosphere in the hall started to shift. He didn't shout, he didn't seek spectacle, but every word he spoke about sanctification and purity of heart carried a formidable spiritual authority. Light hearts grew tense. The more he preached, the more a sacred heaviness filled the sanctuary. Suddenly, in the middle of his sermon, Pastor Emmanuel stopped short. He closed his eyes, raised his right hand toward the sky, then reopened his eyelids filled with sudden dread. Fixing his eyes on the second row of the stage, his gaze locked directly at Bénédicta. The veil of illusion had just fallen for him too. He no longer saw the elegant woman in gleaming finery, but a monstrous entity draped in a cloak of dried blood, trailing the stench of a corpse beneath her princess-like gown. Emmanuel cried out in a booming voice, "Father, what am I seeing? Mercy! This house does not worship God, it worships death. Church of the Lord, awake, cast out the darkness, and cry out to heaven now, for it is written that light drives out shadow." At this call, a spontaneous, urgent prayer rose up from the crowd. Voices rose like thunder. That's when the miracle happened. For the very first time in her existence, Bénédicta felt agonizing pain, a purifying fire, a searing heat that no incantation could put out, began to burn her invisible flesh. Her perfect face twisted in a grimace of agony. Gripped by visceral panic, her body was shaken by violent convulsions. She tried to rise and flee the platform, but the power of the prayer pinned her in place, breaking apart, step by step, the illusion that had kept her among the living. The secret is about to come out at last. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe and hit the bell to support our work and be notified about the rest of our gripping stories. As Pastor Emmanuel's authoritative prayer grew even intense, a shrill, inhuman, piercing scream suddenly tore through the air of the sanctuary, a howl coming from the very depths of the earth. Bénédicta jerked upright, her body twisted by invisible agony. And then, before the terrified eyes of thousands of worshippers and under the merciless gaze of the cameras, a blinding flash lit up the scene. In a mystical burst, Bénédicta completely disintegrated. She vanished into nothingness. All that remained on the floor was her empty satin dress, collapsed like an abandoned skin. The crowd instantly fell into mass hysteria. Screams of terror broke out, chairs were knocked over, and hundreds of people rushed for the doors to flee this cursed place. It was total chaos. Heavy, dark, broken tone. A few minutes later, in the suffocating silence of the pastor's office, reality finally caught up with the mask. Sheltered behind his large black leather desk, Pastor Samuel sat collapsed, his face soaked in tears, his body racked with uncontrollable trembling. Facing him, Pastor Emmanuel and two shaken elders stared at him without a word. "You want to understand?" Samuel murmured in a broken, nearly extinguished voice. "I'll tell you everything." Tragic confession tone, throat dry, eyes glassy like a man who already knows he is damned. Samuel poured it all out. The sacred forest, the man in the red coat, the renunciing of his own descendants, the black ring engraved with a triangle, and above all, the innocent child buried alive beneath the altar's foundations. "This place was never heaven's house," he cried, gripping his head in his hands. "It's a poisoned well. If you keep drinking that water, you will curse yourselves. Flee from here, burn this altar, tear out these stones before the blood that was spilled comes for your own children." He sprang up and rushed toward the exit, broken under the unbearable weight of his own confession. Samuel rushed to his car, the engine roaring into the night as he sped away down the empty road. His hands trembled on the wheel, soaked in cold sweat. Suddenly, glancing in panic into his rear-view mirror, his blood ran cold. On the back seat, a silent, familiar shadow was staring at him. Samuel tried to scream, but the steering wheel suddenly locked, seized by an invisible force. In a horrific screech of tires, the car veered off the road and slammed head-on into a century-old tree. The impact was devastating. Samuel died instantly, taking his pact with him to the grave. 3 days later, as the whole city reeled from the revelations, a confidential document written by the witnesses to his confession was handed over to the authorities. Facing the sacrilege and the threat, a radical decision was made. The sanctuary had to be torn down. The construction machines arrived at dawn before an immense, silent crowd. Jackhammers and bulldozers pounded the concrete. The last pillar collapsed in a suffocating cloud of dust. Of the once gigantic center of immortal grace, nothing remained. Nothing but bare ground, finally cleansed of its grip. Know this. Not everything that suddenly shines comes from the light. When men use what is sacred to build thrones of pride, when they sell their souls and the blood of the innocent for fleeting glory, they are only preparing their own ruin. Thank you for following this story on L'arbre à Palabre. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Take care of your souls and see you very soon for a new story.